sorry.
We're taking a lot of requests to speak, public comment. Please come up, sign up if
Which
you're
one is that?
interested in public
Yeah,
comment. Thank you.
The lead service line?
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds right. Thank you.
Hi. Want to sign up as a speaker?
Yes.
Oh, Doug.
There you go. Here's a pen if you need one.
It is in here, so I guess maybe that can go to. I'm not sure. But the copy is updated in here. So I guess this one can be for Mary.
Okay.
I have a question.
If Mary has that.
I just want to make a comment about
I don't have a list of the agenda numbers.
Which is it?
I have
The,
three items I want to speak on.
okay,
The lead pipe project,
okay, that's, okay, the mics are still on. 240704
24,
is dash 0704.
704. Humane officer,
That's not coming at this meeting. That's,
I just want to make a.
You can speak to it.
I want to, just one,
But yeah.
one sentence statement. And then 1300 Cleveland Ave.
that's also not on here. So you can speak on that, but we'll just take that one for your lead service line.
You can have your pen back.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Okay. Are you good?
Maybe.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
Hey, I got my own pen, I didn't need to steal yours.
That's okay.
You should be good with everything else.
Yes.
Everything seems to be working.
Hi. I'm so sorry
a few more to-
for what happened.
A few more to connect yet.
Carol, we need you to connect. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so Carol and Gary.
Okay, we're
You say when.
rock and roll.
All right, I think we're ready. Good evening. It is 6:35 on July 9th, 2024, and we are at a common council of the city of Wausau. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
We have 11 voting members present.
Okay. All right. Just before we get started, I do want to make a couple of comments, and that will lead into a little more discussion later when we get to some items that have received some significant feedback. Firstly, the agenda went out on Wednesday. We had some technical difficulties, and the packet was not updated until a few days later. So definitely a few items in there that require a little more conversation, and we'll set those up as they come along, and I'll give you my rationale for why I left them on the agenda tonight. So that brings us to the first item, and that is public comment, and we have a few signed up. The clerk will call those. Or do you want me to call them? Sure. Steve and/or Marie Schmidt. Didn't sign up. We do have we do have comment entered into the record from Steve and Marie Schmidt, and we'll put that in the file. Next up is Tom Killian.
Good evening, Tom Killian, 133 East Thomas Street. I'm here tonight to speak in support of the resolution regarding the pilot. This is something we discussed last term, and one, this is a very realistic way of ultimately reducing water rates. Some may argue tonight, well, that's not going to happen overnight. No one said it would, but realistically, like we discussed before, it's probably going to happen in an 8 to 12 month period after a rate case with the PSC. And not only can we reduce these rates by 10% realistically, we can reduce them almost 20% by ultimately phasing out the pilot. And that's the city's and to some degree Ayler's own numbers last term, but it doesn't end there. So it's very realistic to cut ratepayers' rates in town by nearly 20%, I think around 18%. But then what we should also look at after we do that is what I've referred to in the past as a progressive water rate structure, and what that would do. And just like Professor Teodoro wrote about the pilot elimination, his work is excellent. I recommend that you pull it up and kind of enlighten yourselves. He also endorses a progressive rate structure, which does what should be done. So like regular people, modest users of water, people who are consuming it to survive or to wash themselves in the shower or bathtub, they pay a more modest rate. And then as you go up in volume, those who profit more off of high volume uses, you see a slight increase in rates. Not enough to, I would argue, impact profit margins in any significant or moral way. But what it would do is further reduce rates for Wausau citizens. So once you do this tonight and carry out the 10%, then hit the 20%. After you do that, by looking at the viability and adoption of a progressive rate structure, you should be able to see those decreases go into perhaps above 20% ultimately. So please consider this. I know it sounds like there may be, because there was last term, some debate or deliberation on time frame and data and so forth. Well, I guess that's what makes a democracy, debate. But I would say also that this was something that the mayor ran on. It was a cornerstone issue. It meant a lot to the people because that's who's sitting in that chair. So don't forget that this is what the majority of Wausonians want. It's a follow through on that commitment. And once we see other commitments, like on accurate information and accountability, Wausau will be going in the right direction. So please help Wausonians save some money. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Orlando Alfonso.
Good evening. Orlando Alfonso, 1015 Brown Street. I would like to speak briefly on two issues and then a bit more on a third. Regarding the lead hazard reduction capacity building grant. That's a big government mouthful. Thank you for voting this down at committee. I hope you will do the same tonight. This is a glaring example of a bad government program. It provides no money for actual remediation, but does provide money for more hiring, more seminaring, and of course more media campaigns to scare an already petrified citizenry. One thing this program would do, though, is guarantee government growth. At the end of 3 years, we would find ourselves permanently budgeting for these new Wausau lead paint police. All I can say is if this ever passes, small landlords and small businesses beware. Second, regarding lead pipe ordinance, reject it or at least table it. It can wait. We have lived with lead pipes for hundreds of years, and to my knowledge, Aspirus is not considering a lead pipe poisoning wing. More importantly, we need some time for public feedback. As of this moment, the financing of all this is a tremendous unknown. Lead can be a toxin, no doubt, but what is truly the benefit or the rush of replacing homeowners' outside lead pipes when most of them are inside the house anyway? Also, the Wausau pilot alludes to a controversy regarding the timing of this issue, but Mayor Denny himself said it can wait, at least to the end of August, to give us citizens time for feedback. So why vote today? Where I do see controversy and some shenanigans is on my third issue, the reducing or preferably the elimination of the pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes, and giving the citizens a much-needed 10% reduction in their water bill. I don't exactly agree with Tom and the idea of a progressive Marxist rate, but this has been the cut has been talked about favorably by the mayor, various on the council, the media, and us voters since the elections. Why has this resolution taken so long to get on the agenda? You don't need an MBA to see that the pilot program is an accounting gimmick to fleece taxpayers for extra government spending. And why do we charge our own utility a tax? It's crazy. My last thought on this third issue, who could possibly want to impede this? The citizens were devastated last year by their water bill, and soon they will be whacked with their property tax increases. I will be waiting most anxiously and curiously tonight to hear the argument from those on this council that would oppose relieving the poor Wausau taxpayer of 10% of their water bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is John Radke.
John Radke, 703 Franklin Street. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to me. I've got two concerns, and number one was 24-7075 regarding the new res ordinance on the lead service. It really changed a lot in what seems to be the last year from when we were hearing from the same council people on how everything was going to be paid for, that we wouldn't have to worry, our water bills are in service, excuse me, I'm trying to say the service line that we would pay for from the curb stop into the house would be paid for through grants. All of a sudden now it says, well, there's an ordinance that's saying we have to pay for it. And then it follows through by saying that if there's any grant money available or money that the city would have, they would pay some and we might still have to pay it. This leaves just anybody with any kind of lead service line really not having a clue whether they're going to have to pay $5,000 or $10,000, whatever it is, or whatever amount the city might come up with to pay. I think that's really going to hurt home sales, especially on the older homes. And I don't know what the other option is other than I wish we'd just table this. Maybe there can be more discussion, more ideas of what can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Sid Elford.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Sid Elford, 302 Buff Street, Wausau. Been there since 1973. This lead pipe ordinance that they're talking about making it mandatory for people to change plumbing within their house. I don't know how we plan on paying for this. Obviously, it sounds like you own the property, you're going to get the bill. Now, the next thing is that if we're going to have a replacement to the house or to the meter, We had gotten written promises that that would be to no expense for the homeowner. There seems to be some latitude in what I've been hearing. I also have not heard any timing of when this is going to happen. I have concerns about when are they going to do something. The next thing is the grant money on this, from what I understand, is not a sure thing, and it's not going to be enough to cover 8,000 different services at this present point. How does the city plan to pay for it? And then one issue that I had was the private company was coming around and represented themselves as water department employees. I later found out that they weren't. They were from a party who hopes to get the contract to do this. Now, we need to keep some of this stuff, or the most of it, in the Wausau area here instead of hiring people from out of state. Okay, I'm going to move on from there. This is just a quick statement about the humane officer. If we can't find $16,000 to fix that, where are we going to find the millions of dollars for their developers that we just seem to be giving away? End of statement. The other thing is Cleveland Avenue, 1300. That is turning into a junkyard appearance. I've been there since the 70s, and from 95 to 2012, there was nothing over there except an entrance to go to Colby and Colby. They have now shut it off, put a no trespassing sign there, city property, but it still looks terrible. And they told me that if they kept that place open for a year without stuff on it, that they couldn't go back to using it for this storage. Yard was empty except for wood from 95 to 2012. I would like an explanation from someone on that.
Thank you, Mr. Alford.
You're welcome.
What I'm listing a Jeremy Connors. Jeremy Connors. Okay. And that concludes public comment. Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda. Okay. Which one? We've got a request to pull item 24-0714 from INF, and we will pull that and discuss that after the consent agenda. Looking for a motion on the consent agenda. And we have a motion from Alder Larson, second by Carol Lukens. Any further comment or items to pull? Seeing none, we're ready to vote.
You may begin voting. Alder Tierney. Okay. Motion passes 11-0.
Thank you. So we'll take the item that was requested to be pulled. That's item 24-0714 from INF. Resolution approving agreement for the management and maintenance of stormwater facility for the Wausau School District at 1200 West Wausau Avenue. That was approved by the Infrastructure and Facilities Committee 4-0. And I would entertain a motion. We have a motion from Alder Henke, second by Alder Watson. And Alder Lukens, number 1 to speak.
Thank you. I just asked for this to be pulled. I would have brought this to the INF committee. I apologize that I didn't, but I just found out about this since then. So I just wanted to make a statement. I realize that this was approved by the committee. I brought this up before, about artificial turf, and I just wanted to make a statement publicly because I would like us to think about this as a committee, if not now, in any future. But the EU, I've spoken about the hazards of the microplastics, the massive amount of microplastics, and maybe even more so the crumb rubber, including, DNR toxicologist has talked about the danger to the environment and to health of the crumb rubber because it is ground up tires. So includes, phthalates, lead, different chemicals. So I just found out that last September, the EU banned microplastics, including, and I just had this pulled up here, includes artificial turf crumb rubber infill. And scientists are urging other nations to follow suit. So I know that this is probably, my statement is probably not popular with sports fans, but again, I guess my concern is just that the crumb rubber, it migrates. I've seen it migrate personally. So it migrates into the drains and that goes into the water. And, one of the items on this, on the agreement is to, I have the wrong one pulled up here. Let's see, brush synthetic turf in accordance with manufacturer's manual. Crumb rubber migrates, the plastic comes off as well. I've seen it personally here in Wausau at one of the fields. So I guess I just wanted to introduce that. I'm not, I would like to see this, I would like to see schools not using artificial turf because there are just so many negatives, in my opinion, from all the research I've done, definitely outweigh the positives. But I just wanted to make this statement, since it's been approved, and I don't know if anyone else has any comments, but just wanted to bring this up. I'm not trying to interfere with our relationship with the Wausau School District because it's important. I think we have a good relationship with them. So, but it is an item of concern, and I hope that more people consider it an item of concern because it is to health and to the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I share some of the same concerns as Alder Lukens about the use of turf and the installation of turf on athletic fields, both for the environmental migration and then also for the potential, depending on what gets installed, for player injury and the heat retention by that surface. But I also think that this particular item, whether we approve this or not, isn't the solution because now they already have the turf. And I wish that they had really, as they were expending those referendum monies to install those facilities, had looked a little closer at what they were putting in. I know it was difficult for them to find dry fields in the spring. I'm a baseball mom, I get that, but I think that based on reaction of some of the players and some of the things that we've seen with turf, it probably was not the best idea. But I do think this agreement we have to pass because we need an agreement with them to maintain their stormwater facilities, specifically where their stormwater enters our system. We've had troubles with their stormwater facilities before, where the creek that runs across their natural athletic complex has overflowed. They've had trouble with weed cutting. They've blocked up through their maintenance the inlet at 10th and Strobridge, which has flooded people's yards. So I think it's important that we have this agreement. I wish that they had thought through the turf a little better, but now it's among us, and I think we're stuck with it, at least for their two venues. But I really think we still have to move this forward so that they are taking care of those facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Alder Killian.
I just wanted to say thank you to Alder Lukens. I have heard her in the past bring up concerns about environmental contamination, and I feel that that is something that our city and our council need to be acutely aware of. So I agree with her, and I think I too would invite us all to be giving that more consideration.
Thank you. Alder Neal.
Thank you. I have a question for Alder Lukens on the question of migration of material. Now, when we're talking about a water management system, adjacent, nearby, or whatever, does that migration, to the best of your knowledge, occur like, is it airborne? Is it with groundwater? Or how does it get from the field, let's say, into this system? Because perhaps if it's not airborne, there might be some kind of mitigating, like a berm or something that prevents some of that. So anything you could enlighten on that, I appreciate.
It looks like a question to Alder Lukens, and you are number one to speak. Alder Lukens.
Thank you, because I asked to speak again too, because there's something else I forgot to say. As far as it migrates, the crumb rubber migrates off of the turf. So the crumb rubber infill, it's ground up into little crumbs, basically. It's tires that have been used, and then it's ground up into crumbs and put as infill in among the plastic blades. And so as it gets packed down, more has to be added. And then it's something like for an average football field. Now, there probably are differences. I'm not saying this is, for a high school football field, but for an average football field, it's something like 400. Well, I shouldn't even quote it or say it right now, because I'd have to look back. But it's an enormous amount of plastics that don't disintegrate, and then the rubber. And an average football field only lasts 7 to 10 years. It has to be replaced every 7 to 10 years. So all of that, it's a massive amount. It's like 400,000 pounds of one and 40,000 pounds of another, the plastics and the rubber. And so anyway, but to answer your question, the crumbs migrate off of the field. So they migrate on the ground. They move off of the field. They get bumped off of the field. As people are on the field, it moves off of it. And so what I have seen is it going down into the drains, which goes into the water, the groundwater. So, and the plastic also coming off. Now, one thing that I meant to say, and I just happened to see these articles like in the last day, so I will obviously do more research, but there are other things, like I believe I don't know if it's coconut. There are other things that can be used as infill that would be so much better than crumb rubber. So again, it's not that I'm opposed to sports. It's not that I want to create an issue with the Wausau School District, but could we find a happy medium? I would really, really, really appreciate if there could be something else. And not only that, but the heat effect of the plastic. So I will just say, there was a day, and this is public knowledge, it's been brought up before, but last September it was a 70-degree day. And on the field, the temperature was 115 to 120 degrees. So no one can tell me that's safe for kids. No one can tell me that's safe. So, it would be great if there were some other, maybe some other kinds of materials. But anyway, that is my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Without further comment,
May I begin voting? Motion passes 9-2.
thank you. And on to item file number 240702, mayor's appointments. We don't have any tonight, but please, with the number of folks we have in here, if you're interested, get online and sign up for an opportunity to serve. Next up is item 240704 from Finance, the authorization to accept lead hazard reduction capacity building grant through the Office of Lead Hazard Control and Health Homes through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And this failed 0-5 at the Finance Committee. It was also recommended by the Economic Development Committee, primarily because they would have been the manager of this grant. And so based on a few reasons, it failed. We elected to bring it to council because council has the authority to accept or deny grants. So we can't kill a grant in a committee. So with that, I have a motion from Alder Hanke, second from Alder Lukens. First up to speak is Alder Killian.
When this was brought to committee, it was determined that the upfront amount the city would have to provide would be $190,000, I believe, and then there would be no funding source. There was an unknown funding source. Also, Ms. Broderick pointed out at the time that with her absence, the E department was already going to be short-staffed. Plus, we have to hire an additional staff person to handle the administration of the grant, and there would be expenses for the city for travel, I believe, for people to and from DC. So it was just considered to be a negative grant overall for the city, and that's why it did not pass, and I still feel that way at this point in time. Not something I would support.
Thank you. Alder Martins.
Yeah, just to kind of echo what Alder Killian said, that's exactly, I was going to say the exact same thing, is that the Economic Development Department doesn't have the capacity to administer this grant. There was significant financial burdens that the city would have to take on in order to carry out the grant. And the grant was only for the identification of lead hazard sources within the homes. There was nothing about any kind of mitigation, any kind of remediation. It was just finding lead sources, but nothing to help the homeowner in abatement. So there was good intentions, but ultimately it was just it was a bad deal for us overall. So we're gonna turn this grant down.
Thank you. Alder Lukens.
Thank you. Yeah, I had spoken with former director, ED Director Broderick about it, and yeah, that is what she suggested. I'm just basically echoing the other two. And so the suggestion is that since this is an authorization to accept it, I will be voting against it so that we don't accept it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Tierney.
I had put in my request to speak before Alder Martins had spoken, and I also wanted to explain that this did not count towards any remediation. This was really solely for identifying the lead, but no cost towards remediation. So that was one of the big factors for me in not approving this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I might add, I think the original intent of the the appliers or those who applied for this grant was that it could be used toward our lead service line replacement, and it turns out that is not the case. So without further comment,
You may begin voting. Motion fails 1 to 10.
up next, file number 240710 from Economic Development is a resolution approving sale of 1210 North 3rd Street to DNA Taverns LLC, and that was approved at ED 5-0. I have a motion from Lukens, second by Henke, and a request to speak by Alder Gisselman.
Thank you. I think the anticipated use will be a parking lot, and I don't know if there's, but I think that since this is fitting into a neighborhood, I'm not sure if there's plans or if the city has come forth with plans to make sure that this is the appropriate trees and so that it does fit environmentally within the neighborhood. There's a little bit of a park across the street. I think that another parking, just surface there on 3rd Street, there's one on the corner. I think that all efforts by the city or perhaps even by the new owners will be to dress that parking lot up and make it quite acceptable to the neighbors who live across the street as well as down the street. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you. No further comment?
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
Thank you. Up next is the rest of the items tonight will require a suspension of the rules. So I'm looking for a motion to suspend the rules, 6B filing and 12A referral of resolutions requiring a 2/3 vote. Motion by Larson. And a second by Alder Henke. And I have a request to speak from Alder Rasmussen. Hold on a second. Alder Rasmussen.
So it's a question, and it's a procedural question, I guess, for the city attorney. If we approve the motion to suspend the rules so that we can consider all of these other items that are time sensitive, does that include automatic consideration of the pilot item? Or do we debate the pilot item when it comes up separately?
I believe that that's a good, clear question. I believe that if you vote now to suspend all of these items that appear on the agenda after this by a 2/3 vote, you are putting them all on you're leaving them all on the agenda for discussion. Yes, you would be approving, including the last resolution, if you suspend these rules now.
If you're looking to have that pulled separately, I mean, I think we're going to have to vote on it one way or the other.
I really think we should, because I'm concerned about the process that got followed and where we're heading with it, because I think that there is a much easier way to get where you're trying to get. So,
Without objection, I will pull that for separate consideration. Is that authorized under Robert's rules? All right, so we'll do that.
thank you.
Okay, so you're going to be voting to suspend the rules for items 24-0705 through 92-0623.
Alder Gisselman.
Well, so where does that put that item? Shouldn't that have been brought to the, well, I'm confused because how it is considered a separate item to begin with. By pulling it, where do you put it in the agenda?
You want me to take? My intention would be to take it at the end, and it would require a two-thirds vote. It appears to me that it's a parliamentary trick here to get this separated and vote on it by itself on a two-thirds. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, that we can go that way if that's what you want. Parliamentarian, you can weigh in on that.
No, I think you said it correctly, Mayor. You just vote on it separately. You voted to suspend the rules for all these other items. Now that there's been no objection to the last item being pulled from that vote, it remains in its place on the agenda in that order of business, but then you'll take a second vote to decide whether you're going to suspend those same rules as to that last item.
Okay, thank you. That clears that up.
It's a bit of an unusual process, but we can roll with that. So suspension of the rules is the vote.
Okay, you may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, so up next is probably the hot button item here tonight is the item, file number 240705 from the Wausau Water Commission. It's an ordinance creating Chapter 13.66 lead and galvanized water service line replacement, Section 13.66.010, intent and purpose, Section 13.66.020, authorization, Section 13.66030, rules of construction and definitions, Section 13.66040, survey and land inspections, Section 13.66050, partial or full service line material replacement on public side or customer side, Section 1366.060, replacement priority, Section 1366.090, exceptions, Section 1366.100, prohibitions, and Section 110, severability, and lastly, Section 1366.120, under penalties. And I have a motion by Lucan, second by Larson. And I'd just like to tee this up as to why this remained on the agenda. Motion by Watson, second by Larson. Okay, thank you. So this ordinance draft was drafted in 2021. Having some trouble here. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. It's drafted in 2021. It's been a hot potato for 3 years now. I've held 3 water commission meetings. It's been on 2 of those water commission agendas. And the lead service line discussion that we've had over the last several years included tangential subjects of the ordinance or potential requirement to have an ordinance. And, you know, the Water Commission, you know, if we wait another couple of months and keep kicking the can down the road, part of why we're keeping this, putting this on the agenda is we have until October to make some decisions on our grant application. So our grant application gets rated higher by the rules of the federal government. These are strings attached if we have an ordinance. We're not required to have an ordinance. So because this was kind of a hot potato for 3 years, it was my intention to get this to council so that they could discuss it, beat it up, amend it, send it back, go to public comment, whatever that they felt necessary. It wasn't my intention to force somebody to vote with a gun to their head, although that's possible if that's what we want to do. You know, the Water Commission is an appointed body, so they took care of the technical portion of this with the state and federal and local grant requirements piece. You, as the council, are the elected policymakers. So it's your obligation now to determine whether this warrants an ordinance. We could take public comment, and I've heard that it would be desired. And that should come before council, not before the Water Commission, in my opinion. So it would be disingenuous for me to just let it continue to bump along in the Water Commission. So your options really, you can pass it, you can kill it, you can amend it, you can table it, or you can send it back to Committee of the Whole for public comment or whatever governing policy body you elect to do. I think I'm not missing anything here, so with that, we'll open it up for comment, and I have Alder Killian first.
I'll be the first one to beat it up.
Bring it.
Okay. As soon as the packet was released, after the holiday weekend, I got calls early in the morning, and the constituent that called me was concerned about two things. First of all, he mentioned the 6-day rule and mentioned that it came out on, I think they received it on Saturday, and felt it was a holiday weekend and they did not have adequate time to even raise their questions. The second thing was that there had not been any public input. And I would agree very strongly about that. My predecessor asked on serious issues to have public input in English, Hmong, and Spanish, and I would agree wholeheartedly that that is something that we need. But residents, as you heard from the public input at the beginning of council, the citizens are concerned about how is this going to affect me? How much is this going to cost? And I think this ordinance was put on the agenda prematurely because of lack of public comment. It would be my wish to table this and have it addressed more fully after there is public comment and after citizens are able to raise their questions and have factual answers. I think they have spoken clearly that they feel they've been given controversial information. They're told it's going to be free and it's going to be this and it's going to be that, and now they're getting another story. So I do feel that this should be tabled until there is adequate time for public input and until, because the people who talked to me were concerned about the 6-day rule. And I know that you, Mayor Denny, have run on that important issue, and I believe that you are working hard to get there. But that is something that is of concern to the people. And I think those two issues are primary here. Thank you.
And thank you. And as to the 6-day rule, you are correct. It was agenda. It was put on the agenda in the 6-day, but the packet, which really, for you to digest an ordinance of this nature, is a big lift. And for residents, again, over the holiday weekend, I would be thinking the same thing. What are they trying to pull a fast one on us? No, this is our opportunity. Public comment, I don't think was appropriate in the Water Commission. It's appropriate to the ordinance and the legislative body, and that is you. And the public comment or public input was promised back in November. Apparently that did not happen, and I don't know if our CIP partner has done that, but I do believe that belongs to this body, which would be the Common Council. So it could come back in the form of a committee of the whole. It could come back in various forms to get that public comment. But I certainly, is your prerogative. One of the things that drove this, and I'll shut up here, but it was the October grant application. In order to maximize grant, we needed to get this out of the Water Commission. So that's why it's here. Let's beat it up and let's, we can kill it, we can pass it, we can amend it, but we have time, and that's why it's here, so we can discuss it. And I'll take credit for not maybe putting the right format. It could have been a presentation, it could have been a different form, but it came through the normal resolution process. So I'm sorry, I'll stop talking. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. So I guess I have a question for Director Lindman, if he could come up. So we have been removing lead service lines all along with our DNR funds and whatnot. We were just doing it slower until now. And we were on track to take a really long time to do it, but we would eventually get there. But I think even when we started to scale up through our partnership with CIP, the understanding that I was gleaning from all of that dialogue and our ramp up of the program was that we would continue to scale up that program year by year as grant funding became available. And if it wasn't, that we would then slow down or stagnate a bit until more funding was opened up. We were not going to meet that deadline, firm deadline, which wasn't firm to start with, to meet that 5 or 8 year deadline. We were not intending to drop a percentage of that cost on the homeowner if there was no grant funding. Was that where we had left off?
Yeah, this, I mean, all of your comments tonight are well received, right? I mean, those are the same comments I get, right? Like when I go out to the public and talk about an ordinance, the first questions I get, how much is this gonna cost me, right? And I don't know that because this body has to determine that on a year-to-year basis, right? We don't know what the funding is gonna be yet for 2025, right? We made the applications and we're waiting. We know what the funding is for 2024, which we're moving forward with, which is about 3.2 million in grant and 2.1 in loan. But this body still has to determine that 2.1 in loan, how is that going to be paid, right? So, so those documents are being prepared from the DNR and they will come forward to you for approval. And so, and this will be on a year-to-year basis. And to kind of get back to your question with CIP was that we wanted to maximize the grant funding that's available right now for lead service line replacement. And we don't have the staff to do that. We don't have the capacity at the utility to do that and manage this size of a project. So this method of delivery of this project was something that we wanted to look into. It was something we wanted to try, so we set the agreement up that it would be renewed every year, depending on how that agreement with CIP and how the projects go from a year-to-year basis, and also how much funding we're going to get on an annual basis from the DNR. And so that's the direction that we're moving. That's the direction with that agreement that was approved by the council. And so we're moving forward with the 24 work right now, which is going to be anywhere from, over 500 service lines replaced. Next year, it's proposed to be 1,800. So, but again, we're waiting on the funding response on what that's going to be, so we can bring that before you and make those decisions on how much grant versus loan that is going to be allocated to Wausau. So, this ordinance, as the mayor had stated. It's not mandatory. We're not required to have a lead service line replacement ordinance. The challenge that we have is we have two separate regulatory agencies, right? Both want to do their own thing. The EPA has the lead and copper rule, the lead and copper rule revisions, and the lead and copper rule improvements. All of those things we're in compliance with, and we continue to be in compliance with. The challenge with that is we're going to be no longer able to do partial replacements. In the past, we would go through on a street project, we would reconstruct the street, we would replace our side of the lead service line with that project. And if the homeowners didn't want to replace theirs, they didn't have to, right? Now, these new rules that are coming down will eventually make that mandatory, that you can't do a partial replacement anymore. That's not the case right now, but it will be. And so without an ordinance in place, we can't mandate that somebody replace their lead line if we replace our side at some point in the future. Now, the other part of that is the DNR. They said if you want to use our grants, we're not going to allow you to use our money to do partial replacements. So this year, we're only doing private side. So all the homes that are being done this year, the public side has already been replaced. So it's only on the private side that's being replaced. Next year, it will be for both public and private side. So this body has to try to determine, if we're not allowed to do partial replacements with the funding we're gonna get, how are we going to, get to that point to where if we're gonna replace ours, and a homeowner doesn't want to, we really won't be able to replace ours. So without an ordinance, the ordinance allows us to do that. So that's one thing to consider with the ordinance.
Just a follow-up question then, I guess, if I may.
Go ahead.
So then, assuming that we maybe didn't approve the loan, but we have the grant funding for this year, would you just complete fewer of them?
We have to take the loan with the grant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we don't,
that's
you
where
don't
the
have an
partner funding
offset.
comes in?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then going forward, we obviously need to maximize that grant funding. My feeling is that if we get to a situation where we cannot leverage grant funding because we don't have an ordinance, really, that could stop road reconstruction for us, right? Because when you're doing a full reconstruction, the public side of all of it is getting done, the water supply and the wastewater supply. That really then would affect the way we do our streets and if we can do them, right?
Right. Eventually that will happen, right? With the regulations that are coming down with the new lead and copper rule improvements
Yeah.
that are coming out, those will not really take effect for another 3 years, right? So, and those rules are the ones that say that we can't do partial replacements. So right now, we can still do our street projects without mandating that the private side get replaced. That's not a problem. There's exceptions in the current rule that will allow us to do that. But if we want to use any sort of DNR grant funding for lead service line replacement or part of those projects, then we have to do full replacements. That's where we have two regulatory agencies.
Well, and I guess
that we're
that's where I
dealing with.
struggle a little bit because I'm really looking for us to scale up as we have funding available to help the homeowner. And if we can't assist them fully, then we would wait until we could. And, I guess I have an amendment going around in my mind about, maybe amending this to include a provision that says that a mandated replacement would not proceed until grant funding is available to fully assist the property owner. Does that, though, then negate our ability to access the grants? We have an ordinance, but I'd like to put a backstop on this for the homeowner. So would that amendment get us where we need to be?
There is language in the ordinance, that basically leaves it really broad, like as funding is available, right? And so, if the funding does dry up in a year or two, right? This body doesn't need to proceed with the replacement plan, unless, of course, there's something in the rule that triggers that. Like if we have a lead exceedance or something like that, right? With the new testing rules. Those are all risks that we would take on as well.
And we also retain the right to mandate suspension of enforcement, right? So, or do we not? There's an enforcement clause in
Well,
here that scares me a little bit. It says reasonable attempts or a reasonable time frame, and the reasonable time frame is open to interpretation.
Yep.
For some people, reasonable is a year, and for other people, that's not attainable. So I'm concerned about the enforcement piece. I'd like to take some of the teeth out of this if we can, and then still be able to access grant funding, which is why I'm hoping to put an amendment forth if you think that would work.
I think anything, there's another piece to this too, right? This is not a straightforward, simple. We also have the Public Service Commission, right? Regulates our rates and determines how we can use our user rates. So if at some point you wanted to use utility user rates to replace the private side, right? The private side lead service line, if you have an approved ordinance by the PSC, you can pay with utility rates up to 50% of that replacement, right? Not 100%, up to 50%. So that's kind of the other piece, right? In the PSC is a little bit more stringent as far as how the ordinance is written, right? They don't want a lot of leeway in it. They want a specific basically finality to it. Like if you're going to mandate a replacement, you can't just extend it for 20 years because then it's not a mandated replacement, right? So we took a lot of this language from other municipalities. But there are some nuances that we changed, trying to back down on, some of the mandates to give this body more flexibility. But if you want to make an amendment, we can certainly do that. We can change it. I can talk with the PSC, the DNR, all of them as we move forward.
I'm going to offer an amendment because I
Okay.
think using rates to cover any of it, that really concerns me about the financial health of the utility and the future of the rate. So I'm going to hit my amend button. I don't know if that, I guess I have to be done speaking first.
Okay.
Did it? Okay, so thank you. So I will offer an amendment that adds a clause to this that says mandated lead service line replacements will only proceed as grant monies are available to fund the obligation on the private side for the property owner.
Okay, I have an amendment.
Please repeat that.
Mandated replacements will only proceed as grant monies are available to fund the private side obligation for the property owner.
Thank you. And if I might comment on that, just as a word of caution here, we have this year only 2/3 of the grant money. So we have grant money, and we have 1/3, which is loan money. We have not decided, we have not taken that loan, we have not signed for the loan, we have not voted as a body to take on that 2.1 or 2.2 million in added general obligation debt. Okay, so part of your amendment indicates that we wouldn't do anything until it was 100%
We wouldn't.
free of charge, which this year we're taking that on. Next year, if we triple or quadruple, we're now looking at 6 to 8 million that we will have to put
Right.
on the levy.
My goal is that we would scale up only as we have the money to be able to scale up. If there's not enough money and we're required to borrow to fill the gap or pass the cost to the homeowner to fill the gap, then we slow ourselves down, even if it takes extra years. That's my goal with this, is that we would not enforce this mandate unless there's grant money to pay for it with. So that's caveat one. And then, even if we don't approve the loan this year, which is part of it, then we're going to need to figure out a way to do fewer of them to make the money we have go the distance. We're not required to meet this goal. This was an aspirational goal that we set to get these all out faster. If it takes a little longer, then it just takes a little longer. But I don't want the enforcement teeth of this to come and bite the homeowner. But I do think that we need something to be able to tap state and federal grants with. And I think that's what this is. But I think we need to use the amendment to water it down a little bit so that the homeowner isn't going to suffer for it.
You are correct, but just to clarify what the current status is, we do not have the funds to fully fund it for free. And we made a verbal commitment to do that, but we as a body have not approved any of that. And I think we'd all get lynched here if we suggested that somebody getting their lead service line replaced today was going to pay for that. But next year, when it's $8 million, that's on the city. This year, it's $2 million, and we will come to that where we'll have to approve that. But if it's or deny it, and that's a whole nother can of worms. But we can't spend just the grant portion. We have to take it all. So we do it proportionally, 1/3, 2/3.
Right. So even if we have to make good on this year based on the agreements that have been made, then we have a totally different decision for the future years, even if that means a slowdown. But I guess we need to see if I can get a second for my amendment.
And we do have a second.
We do. Okay, thank you.
And I would,
My apologies for accepting the amendment and clearing the queue for anyone who was in order to request to speak. My apologies.
and I guess I would like to ask the city attorney just to make sure we're not hamstringing ourselves on the language that we are now obligating the city to pay for it. Because what's going to happen when we put in our grant request. This year we got 2/3 grant, 1/3 loan. which we're taking on, or at least we've committed that we're going to take that on. Next year could be 50-50. And if it's, so that takes it to a $12 million spend. It could be a 40-60. So we're kind of shooting in the dark here, not knowing what that is. And if we are taking 100% of that on as a city, we can, and we'll slow it down to a couple hundred a year. That's fine. That's fine too, if that's the direction
I
we
think
want
if
to go.
that's how it has to go, that's what's going to have to happen, because we're going to have a subsequent string of decisions. The first one this year being on borrowing the 2.1 million. Next year, borrowing the proportionate share or providing the proportionate share to meet our match. And so, that's a string of future decisions, but either way, if we enact something like this that's a mandate, my goal is to put a protection in it for the homeowner so that mandate is not hitting them too quickly. And if it means that it waits a while until there's funding, and I specifically referenced grant monies in the amendment, because that's the point of all of this, is that we would be securing grant money to speed ourselves up. So if we don't have grant money, then we don't speed up, I guess is my goal.
And under the current plan, we have been getting up to $4,000. But we've got an amendment on the floor with a second, and I have Alder McElhaney looking to speak.
Yeah, I'm going to speak to this amendment. This, I think, I would like, would this include what is included this year or supposedly was included this year, which would be replacing driveways, all of the landscaping that may be dug up. There was all of that promised to every person this year. So I guess I want to make it, that people have come back to me and said, hey, listen, I expect that to be for me as well. So if we're just saying grant money for the lead lateral line, does that include what was included this year with all the extraneous things that was promised as free for restoration of any kind of problem within their yard, driveway, et cetera, et cetera?
This is future looking. It has no impact on what has currently transpired under the current plan.
Yeah, I know, but we're talking about the amendment.
Gotcha. Well,
Okay. So,
and
I
so
mean,
it's a slippery slope if we're entering amendments here before we fully maybe have public comment. But I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe
Well, for a point
we
of
could explain it.
clarification, my definition of this job has included restoration all along.
Okay.
That was the commitment that we made to the homeowner, and I think we should continue to have them all treated equally. So in the first year, if people are getting restoration, the future ones should be too, and that's part of the total cost of the job.
It is.
Thank you.
So I guess I just would like that in there, as part of the amendment, to add the restoration.
Okay.
I think to make it simple would be the replacement of the lead service line and all related construction,
I would
Just-
accept that with my first, if that's.
Friendly amendment?
So we have a typo correction on the amendment, and the second was by Larson. Do you consent to that? He consents to that.
Can you restate that again, please?
And all related construction for full replacement.
Mayor, could I just ask one more question with this? So if we change this as what I'm hearing, that if 100% of grant monies are not available, we don't proceed past what they are.
Well, that's why I'm concerned about the amendment, because we currently only have 67%. It's 2/3, 1/3. The city's committed verbally in past past councils, past administrations, that we would cover this $2 million. That has never been decided by this body. So my caution is, if that's the direction we want to go, realize that this is $60 million, potentially $80 million if you include the city side of it. So we're $60 to $80 million. And right now, we don't know what the grants will be year to year. Part of the effort was to maximize grants, as Mr. Lindman indicated. But we're still shortfall 1/3 right now. Very likely, as the funds are depleted from the BIL, we will be at 50-50 potentially. We don't know that we're going to be at 60-30 next year, or 2/3, 1/3. So it's your decision. I would caution us to get too forward looking on this before we hash the rest of it out. But
I guess for clarity, don't we approve the application, the grant application every year anyway? So if the percentage is
will.
too high, we just don't. Like if it comes out and it's too much on us, it's too, the grant money isn't worth it, that we continue with a slowdown. Those are future decisions for us, right?
Right. So when we apply, that's no commitment to the city, right? We're just reserving our spot. And then when they allocate those funds, that will come back to you to determine, is this a good deal for
Right.
us?
So if
Is
it's
this
too much,
something-
we would not accept it.
Correct. That
Okay.
would be your decision.
That's kind of my goal. I mean, we would walk this through year by year and see how it
Yes.
shakes out. And if it's a bad deal, then we don't go.
okay, up next I have, looks like Alder Tierney. My system's down here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding of the amendment is not that we would have to pay $6 or $12 or $20 million. It's that what we would do is look at what is available in grant money, and that grant money would be going towards making sure that the homeowner is not financially responsible for what now would be their portion. So if we got $1 million in grant money, we go how far that takes us, and that's it. And so that we're not incurring more debt for the city, but yet we're, whether slowly or not, still replacing these lead service lines. And quite honestly, I think this is what our residents thought was going to happen. This is the way it really sounded in the presentations, because I'd watched them on YouTube, and this is the way it was really kind of presented to our citizens, was that, hey, we've got this lead service line replacement, it's a good deal, you're not going to have to pay thousands of dollars because that is going to be part of this solution. And I think now, as we're in the midst of doing this the first year, saying to these citizens that, that's not quite right, that you may get it covered, you may get a portion of it covered, you may not get any of it covered, is really unfair to our homeowners who were not expecting to have a financial burden in this. They were also promised that there would be informational meetings where there would be public input, and by the former mayor, that never happened. So I think that we've done a real disservice to our residents by not doing the public input that was promised to them and not following through with the plan, how it was explained to them. So I think if it means we have to slow down so that we relieve the financial burden on our citizens, that's the right thing for us to do. Thank you.
Thank you, and I want to keep the discussion going, but I need to clarify one thing. Residents who are on the program this year are not affected by this ordinance, and are also have not, we have not renegotiated that implied deal or even express deal that they are going to get this for free. I've seen the flyers. We are not going to take that back on residents this year. This is moving forward.
Right.
And this ordinance should have been taken up and either dispensed with, amended, or passed before we even got to this point. It's been languishing for 3 years. So we're moving the cheese here. You have options. Alder Neal.
Thank you. Regarding the amendment verbiage, the reference to as grant monies are available to fund. Now, do we need to change that or clarify it to say to enable 100% coverage of replacement costs and reconstruction costs? Because we've seen initially it was at 100%, no cost to residents.
Right.
Then we started seeing things like it might be 80-20, it might be 60-40 down the road or whatever, and that drove people crazy. So, I mean, can the verbiage, state something along the lines of at current, 100% levels?
Didn't my amendment say fully fund? Fully fund. So that gets us there, I think.
Available to
Okay.
fully fund the private?
Correct.
Second question regarding just logistics. I'm sure, as our house is probably pretty nominal in terms of the lot size, and the distance from, the curb to the meter. I don't know, it's 30 feet or something. Probably pretty nominal for, the older parts of town and whatnot. Some are even closer to the curb. But there are houses that conceivably, could have 50 or 65 feet to their meter. Now maybe they're not, inflicted with lead service line or galvanized or whatever. But in the case that was the case, somebody had, you have to go up the hill and over the, rise and, across the patio and then, past grandma's house to get to the meter. We're still talking about covering all of that reconstruction cost.
Yeah, right now.
Should we put limits on it?
Well, right now, we have a guaranteed construction cost for the next 3 years, right? So, from the contractor, and that's for every home that gets put on the list. And so, and that's typically how we will bid these projects, and, most of them are done trenchless. They're either boring, they're pulling, they have a pit, and so it's very minimal disturbance that's happening. But to your point, the majority of the lead that we're finding is in the older areas of the city, obviously, much smaller lots. So we haven't run into that at that point.
And you don't see it as something that we need to consider?
I don't think so. I think it would be a rarity if we see it, if it was excessive.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, we're discussing the motion to amend the ordinance as published above here. Alder Lukens.
Thank you. Do you know what the interest rate of the loan is? Isn't it like 0.25%?
Yeah, it's 0.25%, actually.
Okay.
Yes.
So I do like the amendment of using grants. Now, my question with what you said about the PSC.
Yep.
Does that work?
I don't know. I'd have to talk with them. It may or may not. But then, there also, the council would have to determine, do you feel it's necessary for PSC approval, right?
Okay.
Because the only approval we would need that for is if you were planning on using utility dollars to pay for some of the private side. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So, yeah, I do like, could you read the amendment one more
Yeah.
time?
So what I have is a motion to amend the ordinance to add the clause, mandated lead service replacement will only proceed as grant monies are available to fully fund the private side obligation for the full lead service line replacement and all related construction for the property owner.
Okay, thank you. And that was going to be another question of mine because I was told by the CIP Equiflow folks that most of it, that it is trenchless, that it's directional boring, bidirectional boring. And so I haven't heard anything myself about other construction costs or digging up, or trenches. But I guess it depends then what the property is like. That's how that's.
So far, that's all they've been doing. And they don't expect to do any open trench. to drill everything into the home. Yeah,
So there really shouldn't be construction costs.
There will be, because they will have a pit outside by the curb stop where they have to make the connection. So there will be some restoration there. And then also inside the home, when they come up through the floors, typically in the basement, they'll have to do some concrete restoration there to patch everything in. So there will be a little bit of work inside as well.
I know that, there's been a question about, the ordinance mandating to inside work, but it's not, no one is being mandated, it's something I just want to make clear, to do anything with their own pipes inside their house, outside of, what this would be connecting inside, what you just said, but no one.
Correct.
I just want to state that very clearly, because I think there's some misunderstanding maybe among residents, so, correct?
Yes, that is correct. It's only up to the connection to the meter.
Okay.
Yeah, inside the home.
And then I guess that's all. I think that's all I have, actually. So I do like this amendment, because I know, there was one other thing. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure, when you're talking about this year, I know you're talking about some of it will be loan, right? I guess I wasn't quite sure what
Sure.
you were saying.
I can explain that.
Okay.
So for 2024, we were issued, I'm using rough numbers here, about 5.7 million. Of that, only I'm going to say 3.4, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was grant funded, meaning it's quote unquote free money to the city. The balance is the gap. The other third is 2.1 million and change that we will have to borrow through the Safe Drinking Water Loan Fund. And we have determined, I guess through prior statements, that we would not be charging residents that. But if you take this for an example, it's roughly $4,800 is what was bid. Let's just say 5,000. So 1/3 of that would be $1,500 per resident if it was put on the resident, and it's not being put on the resident for 2024, let's be clear. But we're using the same numbers, which is a 3-year bid contract, you would have approximately $300 a year special assessed to a customer over 5 years. That would be the formula under the way it was written, barring this amendment. So this will not affect anything that's being done today. And I think that's very important that you point that out, because I think we already have people thinking they're going to be charged for something that's either done or that they've signed up for. That's not the case. I guess unless you change your minds.
So,
I haven't directed that.
so then the other 2 million or whatever in loans, so we are doing that in order to cover all the work this year, correct?
Yes, and maybe Mary Ann, could you walk us through or Eric, how does that
wasn't
come
there-
into
there
play?
was some-
Timeline that.
We're not allowed to take the grant. They come together.
Yeah, without the
Yep.
loan.
Yep. So, if you want the grant or the principal forgiveness, the loan has to come along with it, right? And so that will have to be budgeted, from the council in order to pay that loan back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the work being done right now, just also so that everybody understands, is being floated by CIP, Community Infrastructure Partners, and they are charging us a percentage until we get the grant money and the loan money to pay that off. That's how it was set up.
Okay, thank you.
And it looks like Alder Gisselman.
Thank you. I think I question I question our tinkering with this ordinance this evening. I think, Mr. Mayor, I think that we had the opportunity to have a committee of the whole, inviting the community, inviting, a specific a presentation perhaps from Mr. Lindman with regard to the future. Instead of we're hearing a lot of editorializing, we're trying to put together an amendment tonight that tried to speak to some of the concerns of the city. citizens, but yet we have no ability to hear from the citizens with regard to this important ordinance. I question whether I'm going to I will most likely vote for the amendment, because if it sails through, fine. But after the amendment is and full discussion, I will certainly present, after discussion on the amendment, certainly present an option for public hearing, perhaps the committee of the whole, perhaps public health and welfare, so that we get an opportunity to hear from the citizens, and the citizens know exactly what the ordinance is saying, for this year, for next year, and for the future. And I sympathize with Alder Rasmussen. Yes, we're trying to protect the citizens as much as possible here from expenses that they may not know about today. But I think we have to make sure that all the citizens, as was made mention earlier, among the Spanish, all of the citizens of the city of Wausau know what we are doing here tonight. And I think that it should have been to a standing committee, committee of the whole, so that we have the opportunity to listen and to also to possibly further tinker with the ordinance. I think we have to make it right with our citizens, but I feel very uncomfortable right now moving this ordinance to passage this evening without some kind of ability to get citizen input and let them hear what we're doing, so that they know what life might be like if you have water coming to your house in 2028. I think that this is an important ordinance. I believe it should have taken a different path to here, but here we are. So I think this city council can change the path. Thank Alder Rasmussen for an attempt at least to take care of some of the questions that our citizens have. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Killian.
I agree that Alder Rasmussen put forth a positive effort to protect the residents of the city, but I also echo Alder Gisselman's sentiments that this ordinance should not move forward until there is a formal method to allow citizen input, and that it be very thorough with English, Hmong, and Spanish. This is a huge issue for our residents, and I don't believe that it should be handled by the council without formal citizen input, whatever that is, a cow or however the council decides to do it. But I think that's a critical issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder McElhaney.
I guess there's so many facets to this with so many regulating agencies that I'm not comfortable anymore. What I heard just now is that with the grant money, there is the necessity that we agree to a loan portion. Is that, well, then this doesn't work. What we're saying is that we're going to pay only the grant monies if we have to have a loan with it. So I think this needs to, I really want to understand, and I think that Eric said he was maybe going back to the regulating agencies and getting clarification of what we can and can't do. I'm not going to support this tonight. I need a lot more information, and the residents need more information, because this got thrown on an agenda. I know it came from the Water Commission, but that a lot of people don't watch that, and it just has panicked most of the city right now. So I definitely was going with, if, as long as we have grant money, we're chugging along, and that's where we're gonna do. But if that is insisting on a loan part, that is an unknown that I can't support right now. Thank you.
Okay, and that was voted on by council, I believe, back in February or March. But you're correct. That wasn't well-known, but that's a fact. Let's see, Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I think that it's comforting that the Public Service Commission component of this doesn't matter if our intention is not to use utility ratepayer dollars for it. I think to keep the utility financially healthy, that is ill-advised anyway. Our goal in all of this, and I think what needs to come out of this meeting tonight, is that our goal is to protect the public from bearing the cost of the lead service line replacement and the restoration, and I think this gets us there. I also think that there is an opportunity for public information sessions after this happens to clarify for everybody exactly what it meant. Do we have an ordinance? Yes. Are you protected? Yes. And so, like I said, every year, most grants that we accept have a local match of some kind. So this is really no different. With the loan and grant component, by the loan component, you're really accepting your share of the local match, and you're financing it at a really cheap interest rate. So with any grant, if we are not okay with the local match for whatever it's supposed to be that year, we don't do it. And I think that's where we need to be clear, both in the minutes of this meeting and in the reporting that comes from it, is that if this takes us longer than we thought because of this fully funding component, that's fine. You know, that we're not committed to pulling all these things in 5 years. If we can, awesome. But if we can't and it takes a little longer, then it takes a little longer. Our commitment to this tonight is to keep this free for the homeowner. And so whether we have a local match, we will have a local match, we know that. If we are not willing to approve our share of the local match, we don't apply for that fund source. That means then you're back to for that year in question, you're back to the process you had before, where you're applying for the amount that you can get from the DNR, and when you run out, you're done. And that's how we were doing it all along. This scale up is really where all of this came from, but I do think we have to give ourselves the opportunity to apply for the grant and to apply for the grant in this cycle in October so that we can keep moving. And the public information sessions can happen at any time. We can go to where people are. Like when we've done other public engagement efforts, we meet people where they're at, whether it's neighborhood groups, whether it's special meetings, whatever. And I think that public information is key to this, that people understand that what we passed tonight as amended protects them from the cost. And that was our goal here. We still want to get this done, but we want a backstop for what the property owner is going to get stuck with. And I think this gets us where we're trying to go, but then it still allows the application to proceed in October.
Alder Lukens.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I understand this. So when you talk about applying for the grant and we have to have a loan, but we have a local match, that local match is us? It's the loan. Oh, the local match for the grant is the loan.
Right.
But then that gets put on the levy.
Well, it's
Correct.
borrowed in the utility. So it plays to the debt that's carried by the utility, but they are always carrying some measure of debt for projects and whatnot. So every budget year, you would budget into their borrowing, which is our municipal borrowing, whatever sum we are willing to take on. If it's a bridge too far that year, then we say no. That's the off-ramp we have given ourselves.
Just possible clarification. I don't know that it goes on the utility. It's a general obligation.
Is it?
Yes, it is.
The utility borrows its own money though,
Well,
right?
That's part of these are the strings attached we're getting here is if we're using these funds under these circumstances, we cannot use utility rates to fund this, and that would
Okay,
be.
so the utility then would not underpin this?
That's correct.
So, okay, if it's part of the municipal borrowing, it's even easier, because as a part of your annual borrowing package, you either want this or don't. And so the finance committee and the council, as it approves those borrowing resolutions, would either include it or not, depending on what their feeling is for the amount.
So I think we should dispense with this amendment and then get to the main
Right.
motion. So we up to speak, Mary Ann, did you want to add? Okay, up to speak is Alder Killian. And we're on the amendment, just,
We're on the amendment?
we're still discussing the amendment before we get to the main body, the main motion.
Okay, I don't know if this is on the amendment. I just wanted to say that I had citizen input already saying that they did not want this to move forward until there was public input session. And the reason they did not want it to move forward is because they felt that once the city says something, they're going to have no choices. And that's the input that I got. So just wanted to put that out there.
So this was in Water Commission for 3 years. It was drafted in 2021. So, and we have until October, so there is no urgency to make a final decision tonight. It looks like I have Alder Watson looking to speak.
I was going to call the question, but if everybody's done, I'll just.
So the question is the motion to amend. And do we want to read this so
Yeah.
we're clear?
Clean up the English a little bit. Mandated lead service line replacement will only proceed as grant monies are available to fully fund the private side obligation for the full lead service line replacement and all related construction for the property owner.
Thank you. Without further comment?
You may begin voting on the amendment. Motion passes 10-1.
Okay, that brings us back to the main motion on the ordinance, and we have options, and I described them. We can accept, we can kick back to a committee, we can amend, which we just did, or we can eliminate this. I'm gonna let the parliamentarian give us a little input.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to add some more fun to this conversation and pointing out that I just confirmed with the clerk that the version you have uploaded in your packet isn't the final version of the ordinance. By the time I got to reviewing it, and I wasn't involved in all the drafting of it, those were others in my office, but I can tell you some of them were of no real concern. The main one that was of concern to me in terms of enforceability, with which I am charged under the statutes in reviewing ordinances, was your current 13.66130 that says that the customer will have an opportunity for a hearing under Chapter 68 before the Wausau Water Works Commission. And I said, what kind of a hearing? What are the remedies? Why the Water Commission? We've already, in our Chapter 2, adopted Chapter 68 to hear any decisions made by any staff, and they're heard by the Administrative Appeal Review Board. So there was no way to draw this or make it consistent with Chapter 2. So we had removed the Water Works Commission from being the judicial body that hears the appeals. There's still some question to me. We made reference in that section to Chapter 2 to take it back so that any appeals would be heard by the Administrative Review Appeals Board. But you had told me it was in there because the PSC wanted it in there, but now it's only if we're going to use water rates.
Right.
That they would care. So are we automatically sending this ordinance to DNR and PSC just to review our ordinance for their various purposes, or?
Yeah, I mean, once the body makes a decision
Okay.
on the ordinance,
Okay.
yeah, then we would send it off. We would need it for our DNR application to get the points, to help us with our grant requests.
In any event, just wanted to make everybody, thank you, Eric, aware of the fact that we have to make that part of that provision consistent with our other ordinances, which may not have existed in other cities' ordinances that were copied. So we need to put those together. So we did remove that and put that to the appeals board. So that was the main substantive change.
Thank you. Alder Watson.
I guess, is there a special meeting of water and finance coming up? The Waterworks and Finance? Is this like a place that this could be discussed at that special committee?
There is for a different topic, but we could potentially you have the option to roll it back. I mean, these are the options we have until October, so that's why it's here now.
I guess my worry is that if we don't, I don't know, get this out in bite-sizable, educating like pieces, like there's a whole bunch of misinformation that we've heard tonight, and just running through this, it's legalese, it's very cumbersome, and you did a great job, but it's it's not the easy read that it is. So I mean, if we can get something that's very simple, understandable, this is what it means, when we have that meeting, that would be great. But I also wonder, in this ordinance, it talks about like the schedule, like the calendar of what's going to be done that next year, right? Does the Water Commission have like a plan, like the roads have 5-year plan, right?
Right.
Does the Water Commission have a plan so like residents would know when they're coming up on this calendar?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the funding that we request, right, is based on, we get scoring based on the census tracts, right? And so LMI census tracts, those areas we get more points, right? So and that's really where the majority of our lead service lines are, in the older parts of the city. And so the census tracts, we're trying to maximize the grant dollars. So we are focusing in on those census tracts, right? And typically the grant dollars, just so everybody's aware, are allocated first to all the private side services. So for an application going in for 2025, we focused in on the census tracts that would give us 100% grant on the private side. Of course, we won't know what that is until the DNR does their calculation, but I feel pretty good that, we're going to do better than we did even this year. But, and so that is really our goal, right, is to focus in on those, to maximize the grant dollars while we're here, or while they're here and accessible. And then for future years, then we would include these other census tracts where there's a lot fewer lines, but we wouldn't have as much potential for grant dollars.
And is there a source out there so far that has like a map that shows, like we know where all the lead lines are?
Well, we don't, on the public side, yeah, but on the private side, our inventory is still ongoing. And that's part of the lead and copper rule too, is we have to have an online version or a public ready version by October. And that's what we're working on now. And so that will be an interactive map accessible to the public, to where they can pull up our GIS mapping and it'll have a dot on it. It'll probably be 3, maybe 4 different colors, like this is lead, this is not lead, this, been replaced. Those, so hopefully it's very simple for the public to see. So those are part of our requirements as well. So not yet, but it's coming.
So all those things I think would be important in like educational session or an informational session.
Yep, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Gisselman.
Yes, I move that we table this ordinance until the August city council meeting. And then as an aside, not part of, I would urge the mayor to call a committee of the whole so that we can present, so that the city council can present this ordinance, and then have Mr. Lindman present with regard to his, what he exactly did tonight, which was excellent. But I think we need to present this, and then any prepared amendments that we prepared amendments to the ordinance can also be presented perhaps prior to the committee of the whole, but, or assuming that there is a committee of the whole. But I think that for us to be fully aware in August, as this ordinance is tabled, I think we need something prior, and I think the mayor or the president of the city council can indeed call, if you want to alderperson to call a committee of the whole, so be it. But I think that a committee of the whole before a city council meeting would certainly be appropriate to gather the information that we need, the amendments that we need presented in front of us, so that everything would be, so that come August, we would know exactly where we are, what's in front of us, and the people, and the citizens know also exactly what is in front of them and what their future is all about. So with that, I move that we table this until the August meeting of the City Council. Thank you.
So I have a motion to table by Alder Gisselman. And I have a second by Alder Neal. So the motion is to table for the August meeting with some contingencies on Committee of the Wholes. And I would not recommend, or I would not, we would not have to require two alders do this. Between Alder Rasmussen and myself, we can do this. If that's the desire of the body, and I think that is a wise move, and it's the legislative body's obligation to have those hearings, and we should do them in whatever format is required. I think we need to take the table up first. I'll defer to the parliamentarian. I think we need to take the tabling. Sorry about that. So we have the
Phone consideration.
So my comment is about the tabling.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I would agree on that. I think that we can, if everyone makes themselves available for said committee of the whole, we should be able to accommodate that the first week of August and have that input transcribed for that second Tuesday of August. There's only one meeting in the summer and during the summer months. So the second Tuesday of August is when that item would return to us. And so the first week of August, either the tail end of July, first part of August, we will look for a date when this room is available, and we will schedule that committee of the whole. And along with that meeting announcement, we could put out a press release about the fact that public comment on that specific item is welcome and encouraged. And so whether people want to email their comment in or appear and make their comment, they would be welcome to do that. So I think we can accommodate that without two alders asking for it.
I would agree.
Thank you.
All right, this would be on the motion to table. Do we have more comments?
Yep.
Alder Watson.
Yeah, I guess it was sort of the what to do in the transition of the tabling. Is it possible to send off the ordinance we're thinking about to all those bodies that you're talking about and see what they think about it? Do you have some connections?
I do.
Okay.
I don't know if they'll respond, but I'm happy
Well,
to do it. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, just to see what they think, compare and contrast and have that info. I know
Sure.
you won't get it back for a couple months, but thank you.
Yeah, but I'll certainly try. Yeah.
Thank you. Alder Lukens.
Thank you. If we do make it possible for people to make public comment, I guess if there's a way that we could get information out to the public, clear, easy to understand information, also in English, Hmong, Spanish, I agree. If we could get that out in some way, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Killian.
I was just going to reiterate the importance of multi-language, and Alder Lukens already did that, so thank you.
Thank you. Alder Hanke.
Thank you. Any amendments that we might have to this, who do we send those to? Now that we're not going to be making amendments on them tonight. Send it to you, Eric, or?
I would.
Okay.
Probably, yeah.
So the question was, could you repeat the question?
I had some amendments, but this tabling cut me off. So I'll send them to Eric and Ann.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you have suggestions, send them to Eric, copy city attorney. Part of the beating up process, we are ready to vote on tabling of the motion.
Motion to postpone consideration of the item 240705 to the August Common Council meeting.
Thank you.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0. And just note that the August meeting will be on Wednesday, August 14th, not the Tuesday due to Election Day.
Thanks for the discussion.
How are we doing on time and bio breaks? Does anyone need a break here? We've probably got another 30 minutes. Any suggestion here to recess for 5 minutes? No. Let's roll. Okay, up next is file 240706 from Finance, resolution approving the interlocal agreement between City of Wausau and Marathon County for the 2022 Burn Justice Assistance Grant Program Award, and that was pending in Finance. That went past as 5-0. And I have a motion from Lukens, second by Rasmussen. Alder Martins.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to say that you said half of what I was going to say, that this item has passed 5-0 in Finance. Both 24-0706 and 24-0707 are the same grant, but it's for two separate grant years. The 2022 grant was not, inadvertently had not been accepted. This grant reimburses the expenses covered for the previous year. So where the police department was able to submit the paperwork and get their reimbursement, but we have to approve the grants. So both of these items did pass Finance.
Thank you. And any further comments?
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
Next item is an iteration of the last. It's 240707, a finance resolution that also passed 5-0, approving the interlocal agreement between the City of Wausau and Marathon County for the 2023 Burn Justice Assistance Grant Program Award. I have a motion from Lukens, second from Watson.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
Up next, file number 24-0708 is a resolution from Finance authorizing the City of Wausau to enter into a 3-year 2024-2027 shared services agreement with the Wausau School District for school resources officers, and that passed 5-0. We have a motion from Alder Lukens, second from Tierney. Further comments? Seeing none? Oh, hang on, we do have a comment. Martins, go ahead.
I'll just give a brief comment about this one. This one passed 5-0 in Finance also. Just one of the things to point out about this this agreement is that in the previous agreement, the school resource officers were funded at a 50% level by the school district. For this next 3-year term, they will be funded at a 75% level, which is more in line to the amount of service that they're providing to the school district. So the increase in funding will help the department recover some of the, help to cover some of the costs for other programs that they're using, or that they lost funding for within the department, most notably our reduced grant funding for the Victim Resource Unit.
Thank you.
Can I just correct one point with that? That was excellent. Originally, we settled on 50% with the school district because our school resource officers were expected to be spending 50% of their time on non-school related issues. Currently, they spend 100% of their time. So this contract reimburses us 75% of the cost to employ those school resource officers for the 9 months of the school year. The city still covers the cost of employing them in the remaining 3 months. And both the school district and the police department have discussed the appropriate goal after this 3-year contract is to have them cover 100% of that cost during the 9 months of the school year, seeing as though they're in the school that period of time, and that spreads the cost. This was a school board member that identified that spreads the cost of providing school resource officers that serve the whole school to the entire school district, and not having Wausau residents subsidizing more of that per resident because they're already taxed by the school district. So having one taxing entity that covers that cost seems the most fair way to cover that cost. This was our step in that direction. So increase it 25%, and then you should expect to see us move forward with the next agreement being 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments?
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
Up next, 920623, another finance resolution approving First Amendment to, did I skip one? Sorry, let me back up. 240709, finance resolution approving United Way impact grant funding for assisting the unhoused with security deposits. I think this is a new effort from Tammy, but it did pass as well, 5-0. That was a Tracy Rieger. Okay, appreciate that.
Alder Tierney, did you want to, okay.
Okay. Comments? Seeing no comments?
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, up another finance. Finance was busy tonight. 92-0623, finance resolution approving First Amendment to agreement for lease to city parking lot 3rd and McClellan Streets, Curly Cal LLC. That I believe also passed 5-0. And I have a motion from Larson, second by Tierney. Any comments, questions? Seeing none.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, up next. This is going to be would this be a vote to suspend the rules, or do we take a motion to consider and vote to consider it?
I think you could do it either way. I mean, it's listed on the agenda under suspension of those rules because of the filing requirement and the referral from a committee, which would require a 2/3 vote, or you could ask the council if they object to having it on the agenda. If there's no objections, then you could take a first and a second and discuss it.
So without objection, I would take a motion to consider offering guidance to the mayor on the pilot payment and rate, potential rate reduction. Is that an objection?
It is. My request to speak is, because I have a comment.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. So I think that everyone's aware, based on the correspondence that I shared with the council this week, this item has come to us out of order. We do a lot of talking in this chamber about proper process. Our council rules require that resolutions put before you for action be vetted by our standing committees for a reason. There's research that's required. You need facts, you need figures, you need data. None of that exists here. Last term, during the budget process, we committed to study the impact and reasonable, sensible options for potential reduction of the pilot payment. And we asked the staff and the utility and Ellers to prepare figures for a joint session of Finance and the Water Commission to take place in August. That meeting is on track to happen. I've talked to both staffers who are preparing the data. They do not lack clarity on what data we want to know about. They're preparing the materials. The city's financial planner is thinking on what the impact is both to the city and the utility of alterations to the pilot. It's not saying it can't happen, but this should not be in front of us until finance has had a chance to do that research and analyze those impacts. We can have impacts on our bond rating from this. We can have impacts. This has had no legal review. It's had no financial analysis. And so for us to just throw a dart and say, boom, 10%, that is irresponsible of us. We need to let the Finance Committee do its work. That's why they're here. The other thing is that when the budget draft comes out and it goes to the Finance Committee in October and the finance workshops begin, that draft budget is the mayor's draft budget. And so right now, the mayor and the staff are working on figuring out what next year's budget draft is going to be. And so they are looking at cost to continue, they're looking at all sorts of figures. And so when the finance committee gets the draft, it is the mayor's draft. And so if the mayor would want to make adjustments to any part of that budget in terms of cuts, additions, revenue reductions, he can make them without any direction from the council and include them in his draft. And I'll call on Mary Ann to verify that I'm right on that. I also think that in terms of the analysis piece, I'd like to hear from the Public Works Director, because I have some serious concerns about us just slapping a number on this and moving forward. We were cautious to request information on this because it's big money. And so what happens is if we move without that information too soon, we not only usurp the activity of the Finance Committee, we can cause ourselves a different set of budget problems. And this really paints the Finance Committee in a corner. Now, if the mayor wants to include changes in his draft budget that causes the same level of reduction, the Finance Committee, when it receives the draft, can decide to keep those in, adjust them, or remove them, but that's their job. Doing this out of turn is not our job. And just because we want this to happen, the process that got followed here is not our process, and it does violate our rules. Thank you.
Well, what we have here is an objection to bringing this to the forefront, so we should rule on that. The resolution that we did adopt, it was before a committee, as I outlined in my letter to you. The resolution did not specify policy direction. So expectations not stated are expectations never met. What are we going to do is we're going to look at it and then decide what we're going to do.
Is there a
Our
point of
goal-
order here?
There is an objection. Let's put that to rest. So we have an objection.
But do we debate on suspending the rules?
No, you probably, now that you've drawn an objection, you should take a vote on whether you're going to suspend the rules, because I would argue that the action that you're proposing in your resolution is different than the one that came out of the committee in Resolution 231121 from the Finance Committee last year. And I asked that that be downloaded and put in the packet. Was that included in the packet? The resolution.
The original
that's referenced
resolution.
Yes.
In his, okay, good, so they
It
can
was
see what
added
that
to-
said?
Yeah.
Okay.
For clarity,
So that finance resolution didn't order us to reduce the water rates by 10% by virtue of reducing
Right.
the pilot payment.
For clarity, my objection that I'm registering right now is that we should consider voting to not take this up at all tonight, because the Finance Committee's process that it is already working on needs to play out first. We are uninformed. We are working blind here. So that's my ask, is that we vote this down right up front, because we do not need to have this discussion tonight. Thank you.
It's only guidance. It's the last meeting before council heads off on your holiday schedule, and I was looking for more specific guidance as president of the Water Commission. So what we have, you have options. You can kill it, which appears what we're looking to do here. Does it require, question of the parliamentarian, so we have an objection to take this up. I would put it before the council to, do we need a roll call vote on this? To take it up or not take it up?
Point of order, why are we not just voting on the suspend the rules, as
That's
earlier
what I
in this
think we
meeting?
should do.
Because we
It stated we would be doing.
Yes.
Because we
That's
had
what
an
we should be doing
objection,
now.
we have an objection to take it up, period. So
Well, because it was taken up without the suspend the rules vote, and it should not have been
Right.
taken up.
Right, and without it having, that action having come from a committee. So you should vote on whether you're going to suspend the rules and put it before the council. I did
There you
say
go.
that earlier.
So, I have pulled up for you guys to vote on suspending the rules for, I'll add in for this agenda item, for item 24-0718.
So then for clarity, if we vote to not suspend the rules, this item is not before us.
Correct.
Thank you.
you're okay, the normal voting procedure?
So explain. If they vote yes, it's to suspend the rules, and if they vote no, they don't want to suspend the rules.
So yes, if you want to discuss, no, if you don't want to discuss. Correct?
Yes.
Is everyone clear? Is everyone clear?
Public comments and suggestions. I see a potential taker. Please state your name and give us some comments.
Yeah, Jay Cronenwetter, Sturgeonetti Road. First off, I wanted to offer to be an open ear if the mayor or council as a body or individually has any interest in what the school board's citizen task force on elementary redistricting or I guess is what to do with the various elementary schools. And for those of you who are unaware, we're in this process now where we're meeting monthly. It'll eventually become every 2 weeks to try and provide guidance to the school board and administration on what we want done with our schools. I think most of you probably noticed a big to-do that went on last time the administration tried to address this, so they've decided very wisely to get citizens involved, and we have 40-some people. We've had one meeting. We have our second tomorrow. My email is cronenwetter@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out with any questions or input. The body and the consultants who are running this are very interested in getting diverse voices outside of our specific task force involved as well. I know Mr. Reike at John Marshall, my neighborhood school, is busy communicating to classmates of my son and others that their input is welcome as well. I guess for those of you who know me, you probably know that I care a lot about Wausau. I lived here my whole life. And I guess welcome, Mr. Mayor. Congratulations on your election. Some traditions probably should be, put out to pasture, however. And, again, it's interesting we had a vote to not suspend the rules. That doesn't seem to happen too often in this body. I think generally following the rules you set out for your own debate and resolutions and passing ordinances, it's very wise to follow those rules unless there's a real compelling reason not to. And, starting off by late notice and, missing some of the public communication that we generally require has been problematic in the past, and hopefully this sets a new precedent. I do find it kind of interesting that this was an effort to try and reduce the financial impact on the ratepayers or taxpayers or homeowners or however you want to slice and dice it. If we can't suspend the rules to encourage reducing rates, I guess maybe we should try not to suspend the rules to, sell property to single bidding property developers. I watched my friend Terry, and congratulations, Terry, on your election as well. On two very large issues involving real estate now, she's been sort of blindsided by just bad information from staff, just absolute incorrect information. Ironically enough, the first time was involving the sale of the property to a Gadorzi-related operation, and, at that meeting, she was told by legal counsel that the advice was, we need to sell this property or we're violating a good faith agreement in a contract that she had read some provisions from. I would note that that contract came to light quite loudly. Mr. Neal probably remembers this. Brad Markright, ran off because of an investigation that was surrounding that property and other issues. Improper contracting, not following rules and procedure, obligating the city. And it was kind of amazing that contract then was used to promote a no-bid sale of real estate to this developer. When that contract, city attorney even mentioned there's no vote. She couldn't find a vote that actually obligated the city to this contract. It was something that the mayor at the time, Mr. Tipple, signed. And, there it sat. And the property wasn't marketed jointly as the contract called for it to be done. And then that was held up without showing council, by the way. That was held up as the reason why we had to sell Chuck the property that we had already paid him on a no-bid contract to improve. She's a real estate agent. I just, on these real estate issues, if she's smelling something, I would urge the rest of you to please listen to her. And recently, the Thomas Street properties that was addressed again with finance and the CDA stuff, given false information, bad information on that as well. Please, Mr. Mayor, encourage your staff to get the right info to your council members. They're here to do good work.
Thanks, Jay. It's certainly my intent to follow the rules. It's also my intention to allow easier access to all council members to the council agenda. So we're not setting situations up to block the people. It looks like we have a straggler here.
Yes, I'm going for the triple-double tonight, so thank you. So some things that were mentioned this evening, I just wanted to comment on them. So when you're using low and moderate income areas and census block groups and so forth, and linguistic isolation rates to juice your scores on state and federal funding, you cannot then do a public process after the fact and not end up in some hot water ultimately. In fact, tonight the council looked like kind of the frog in the pot. Secondly, the finance chair brought up Wyatt property. Now, what happened there, and I don't think he was aware, is the city did a deficient environmental review for the federal funding, and HUD would not release the funds. The city obscured that fact because it was very embarrassing for the city. Also on language, the Metro Ride Title VI analysis makes very clear that Hmong language meets the safe harbor threshold. So I just want you to know that at some times it really isn't an elective to allow people to be involved in their government. They always should be. And some of these families, don't forget, served our country and put their lives on the line. I think the city can put up $200 for some translation so that we can allow our people to be involved in the process. Now, keep in mind, there's no language access plan to speak of that the city has. HUD would want one. I was rebuffed on multiple occasions under the Rosenberg administration when I requested Hmong and Spanish notifications. That should have been done. In fact, I would argue it's a violation of federal guidelines and sometimes requirements when you're playing with federal money and you do not do that. About the rules, Mr. Cronenwetter spoke eloquently on that. And trust and credibility cannot and will not exist for a government that insists its own people follow government rules while the government itself will not follow its rules and violates those rules willingly and without contrition. And this is a habitual, demonstrable pattern of the city of Wausau violating federal best practices and sometimes federal requirements when a project entails federal dollars. It's pushing the envelope. And while my detractors may refer to me as a Marxist or too rigid on the rules, they don't generally refer to me as a hypocrite. And it's not enough for the government to posture with empty rhetoric. You need to follow through with action. Lastly, I did not resign from the Liberation and Freedom Committee for lack of quorum. As I submitted my resignation to Mayor Rosenberg, I did it because I told her the city's own actions and policies were the biggest obstacle to inclusion in our city that we are facing. Please do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call. Hot mic. 8:45. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Lukens. All in favor?
Aye.
We're out of here.
Who said so moved over there? Was that Neil or Martin's?
I think it was Neil.
Okay.
It wasn't me.
Why can't, oh, I see it. Right. You got it. Passes, yes. End meeting. Yes. Oh, God.
Be crazy.